We are super excited tonight to have Aaron Dixon speak to us on the legacy of the Black Panther Party. Hugo Chavez died this week. As many people know, the depth at which the ruling class and their media began to rewrite the history of the Venezuelan people and their role in a revolutionary process to challenge capitalism is utterly disgusting to me. And we're very lucky to have Cree Peterson-Smith and Aaron Dixon tonight. Cree is an ISO member. He's a graduate student at Clark University. His article on We Are All Trayvon, 1 year after Trayvon Martin's death, is in the current issue, The Socialist Worker. Let's give it up for Cree.
Thank you. And the topic of this meeting is the Black Power revolt in the 1960s. Obviously, Brother Dixon can speak to that much more eloquently than I can, both with his knowledge and his experience of that era. And so what I actually want to do is start with today. I want to talk about 2013, and just start with a couple of months ago, on January 14th, tell a story about a young brother who's 18 years old, young black man named Kevin Clark, who was walking home from school. He's a college student, when he was approached by two police officers on motorcycles. And one of the cops started riding his motorcycle toward Kevin, which prompted Kevin to say, "What are you doing? You're trying to run me over?" And it was at that moment that both the cops jumped off their motorcycles and tackled Kevin to the ground. And they were holding him down, putting his face in the pavement, and pulling his hands behind his back, and of course calling for backup. And so another police car arrives, and all in all, 10 additional cops came to deal with this one young brother. And we wouldn't know about it at all had it not been video recorded by somebody who caught the whole thing on her phone. Now, watching that video, a number of things are clear. First, just the violence of policing that happens every day in this country, particularly toward black and brown people. That violence is not, the violence that was visited upon Kevin Clark was not an aberration, but actually that's the typical modus operandi of the police. Two is the utter contempt with which they have for Kevin and for the young people gathering around the scene. But I think the thing that comes across most clearly in the video is the cops' fear of Kevin. Their fear of him and their fear of the young people gathering around. And when you hear the words of Aaron Dixon, when you hear the history that he made, along with countless other people, and the history that he carries, it becomes very clear why they're afraid of the black population. Our oppression has been essential to the establishment of the country, and I would argue it was not just essential historically, it remains a feature of American society today, and that is an essential part of American society today. It goes without saying, of course, that this country was founded on slavery. There has been a price to pay for the people who run this country. As we have been exploited and oppressed, we've also been volatile and a revolting group of people. From slave revolts to the civil rights and black power movements to prison revolts to strikes, black people have periodically resisted throughout US history. If you look at the civil rights movement, when people were demanding the right to sit in front of a bus, or the right to sit at an unsegregated lunch counter and so on, to go to schools that white children went to, the response was dogs, fire hoses, incredible violence, assassinations, to a point where it became routine. I just want to read a brief, but I think very incisive statement by Thomas Jefferson, one of the so-called founding fathers. He says, "It is as if we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is on one scale and self-preservation on the other." So, self-preservation, that is, if they want to continue building the kind of country that they set out to continue, they have to hold us down. And they made a decision to do that, but they understand there's a price to pay. You will live in fear of the wolf that you're holding down. Now, you will hear people say that there is something outdated about the Black Panthers and the Black Power movement, especially now that we have a black president. Why go outside of the system we just have to give it time, and so on. The fact that we had a black president has not abated the attack on black people. And then what we need to do is build a fight that targets the system itself. Yes, there's any number of reforms that we need to fight for and win today. We need to stop the fact that people are losing their homes. We need to stop the racist police terror and so on. But ultimately, if we don't get rid of the system that thrives off of this racism, then I think that we're going to have to keep on fighting these battles. I know a great organization called the International Socialist Organization. That's my organization. Let's put our heads together and figure out how we can build the broadest, most ferocious resistance to racism and all oppression today, because I believe it is as urgent today as it was in the 1960s. Thank you.
First of all, I should be applauding you guys for coming out in this blizzard we got here. I'm going to have this handsome couple read an excerpt from the book, and then we'll kick it off.
Texas' death had a heavy impact on all of us. His happy-go-lucky, comical ways had put everyone at ease, yet he could be serious and fearless when needed. He and Naomi had just started seeing each other. Both of them had been moving from relationship to relationship until they discovered their love for one another. Now Naomi was walking around like a zombie.
We had considered ourselves as eternal soldiers, always thinking we would fight the enemy to victory or to death. What we had failed to realize was that the enemy, at times, was us.
That was about 1978. That was when I left the Black Panther Party. I had joined the Black Panther Party in April of '68. I left almost 10 years to the date that I had joined. A lot of people don't realize that it was Malcolm X's death that led to the formation of the Black Panther Party. When Malcolm X was killed, that's when Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton got together and decided that they were going to start an organization to continue the work of Malcolm X and continue the work of the organization that he had created in Harlem. Then, of course, in 1964, Medgar Evers was assassinated. Medgar Evers was one of the powerful leaders of the civil rights movement. He was right up there, shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King. But he differed from Martin Luther King in that he carried a gun and he did believe in self-defense. In 1967, I started going to the University of Washington. I helped start the first Black Student Union. We organized a protest against the high school, and we marched on the school and we closed it down. And that was our first little victory. And a couple of days later, I was arrested along with other leaders of the BSU, and we found ourselves out in the King County Jail in Seattle. And while we were sitting there, the news came on, and the news announced that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. But on the TV, it began to show the riots breaking out all across the country, you know, Harlem and Philadelphia and Chicago and Detroit. And I remember saying to myself that, okay, this is it. This is it. We got to do something else. And I remember saying that the picket sign for me was going to be replaced with a gun. We went down there to a Black Student Union conference, and Bobby Seale was supposed to come over and give the keynote address, but we heard about this funeral that was taking place over in Oakland. This young man named Little Bobby Hutton. Little Bobby Hutton was the first person to join the Black Panther Party, and he was only 14 years old. And so 19 members of the Black Panther Party armed themselves, went out in cars, and ended up in a shootout with the Oakland Police Department. So we heard about this funeral, and so we traveled over to Oakland, and we went into the funeral. When we drove, we saw Marlon Brando standing out front with the Black Panther uniform on, a black beret. He was talking to Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale came over to San Francisco and gave a keynote speech at San Francisco State after the funeral. He was about 2 hours late. We waited for him. And the speech that he gave, I remember, is one of the most electrifying speeches that I have ever heard, even to this day. He must have spoke for about 2 hours. I remember during the speech, he stopped and said, anybody in here got anything to drink? I had bought a bottle of vodka for my parents that I was going to give to them because it was cheaper in the Bay Area. So I ran and got my bottle and took it up to Bobby, and he took a swig. He passed it around to the other comrades, and he began to speak more. So, so when he was over, we made a beeline to Bobby Seale. We said we want a chapter of the Black Panther Party in Seattle. A week later, he flies to Seattle. We met at my mother's house, and for a 3-day period, we met with Bobby Seale and George Murray, the Minister of Education of the Black Panther Party. One of the first things that Bobby Seale told us was that we had to have, in order to be in the Black Panther Party, we had to have 2 guns, and we had to have 2,000 rounds of ammunition. He gave us a book list of 25 books and told us that we had to read these books. Not only did we have to read these books, we had to study 2 hours a day. And then we had to have political education class twice a week. Landon is in the front room watching TV because he didn't drink or smoke. So we're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden we hear a loud bang. It's a gunshot. We ran into the living room, and Landon is sitting there with his .44 Magnum in his hand. And Robert Bates said, "Man, what happened, man? What'd you do?" He said, "Man, I'm tired. I got tired of watching the cowboys always killing the Indians. I got tired of that shit." So he blew his TV out. Damn. So we went down to West Oakland. We went outside to smoke our cool cigarettes. A police car drives by, and Orlando started yelling. He started yelling, "Pig, pig, you motherfucking pig, you better stop at that stop sign." And pretty soon, 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8 police cars start showing up. One of the officers, a lieutenant, in front of the police, he's got his hand on his gun. Now we all have our hands on our guns as well. And Landon is in front of our group. And he starts walking towards Landon. He says, "I'm going to search you." And Landon is backing up saying, "No, you're not going to search me." And this went on for a few seconds. "I'm going to search you." "No, you ain't going to search me." And just when we thought that things were going to pop off, while Landon is backing up, he trips over a garbage can top. And the garbage can top reverberates. And that just broke the ice. Because the police turned around, they didn't say a word, they turned around and they got in their cars and they drove off. And the next day I was on a flight back to Seattle, and I knew what my mission was to organize the Black Panther Party chapter. It was very powerful. It was a very powerful moment, and when we got our phones turned on, we started getting calls from the community. "Can you help with this? Can you help with that? The police are bothering me. The police do this. My boyfriend's messing with me. My husband's bothering me. My landlord took the door off." So, we sent comrades, and we sent Panthers to the house of some of these calls. It's 5 or 6 comrades with their rifles and shotguns, and "Hey, if you mess with this woman again, we're gonna come back and deal with you." So this was the first time the community had somebody that they could call. They couldn't call the police. Who else were they gonna call? This was the first time they had somebody that they could call. I remember that there was a woman that called us. She had 7 kids. She couldn't pay her rent. The landlord took the door off her house. We sent the comrades to the landlord's house. They got the door. They carried the door down the street, put it back on the hinges. So you can imagine, these armed Panthers with the rifles, shotguns, these Black Panther uniforms on. You can imagine the reaction of the police when they see these black men standing at attention. And the Black Panther Party also had a newspaper that we put out. And that newspaper, for the whole time that the party existed, I think it was about 16 years that the party was in existence, there was only one, maybe 2-week period when that paper didn't come out. Because we understood how important that paper was. We understood that it was important to have our own political organ to get out what the party was about, to talk about what was going on in the community. Richard Nixon, Attorney General John Mitchell, they called a press conference. And they said that the Black Panther Party was the #1 threat to the security of America. And so, we started opening up these breakfast programs because we said, how can little Johnny learn that 5 apples and 4 apples is 9 apples? He ain't even had an apple. So we started these breakfast programs all across the country. In Seattle, we eventually opened up 5 breakfast program locations in all the major housing projects. Wherever there was a need, we filled that need. We filled that need. You know, the Liberation School, at the time, there were no summer programs that were taking place in the country, you know, for working families. You know, during the summer, when a working mother had to go to work, she had to find somebody to watch her kids. So we said, okay, we're going to fill that void. We started what was called the Liberation School during the summer. And when parents had to go to work, they could drop their kids off at the Liberation School. And we fed them breakfast, we fed them lunch. We took them on field trips. We gave them political education, told them about who Malcolm X was and who Huey was and Bobby Seale. So all the time they're starting these raids, starting to raid the Black Panther Party offices. When the program started, they seemed to really escalate their attack on us. They even came with guns into the breakfast program in LA and the breakfast program in Chicago and other places to try to scare the kids away. We also had to, at this period, we had to start fortifying our offices with sandbags and steel gates and make sure we had gas masks. And so on the morning of December 4th, Mark Clark, the captain of the Peoria, Illinois chapter, was on guard duty. A knock comes on the door. He goes to the door with his shotgun and says, "Who is it?" Shots rang out. They go through the door instantly and kill Mark Clark. Within the same minute, the ATF burst through the rear door, the back door. They come running in with their machine guns. They get all the Panthers up and put them in the against the wall machine gun. They go into Fred Hampton's room. His wife tries to wake him. His wife's 6 months pregnant. She tries to wake him. They lower their machine gun and they killed him while he was in his sleep. 21 years old. That's how afraid of this young man that they were. LA chapter, the most military-minded of all the chapters, because they had the most fastest police department in the world in LA. And so the Panthers in LA were always prepared and always ready. They had built a bunker inside their office, a sandbag bunker. They had a lot of Vietnam vets. They had built tunnels, underground tunnels in their office. They built a machine gun nest on the second floor. And we used to always get calls of people trying to warn us that an attack was coming. So anyway, the comrades took the chairs and tables from both sides of the door, and they had this bunker. And so when this raid started, they burst through the door. The ATF, the FBI, the LA pigs, they burst through the door. They couldn't go right, they couldn't go left because the chairs were there, and this bunker was facing them, and the comrades just opened up on them and blew them out the door. And they had a shootout that lasted for 6 to 8 hours. And on the second floor, they were literally fighting room to room. Finally, the community woke up. The community was out on the streets en masse. It was daylight, and there were several Panthers in there that were wounded. There was a sister in there that was shot in both her legs. And even though she was shot, she still continued to fire. And they finally had to put up the white flag and surrender. And so the mayor saw what happened in Chicago. He saw what happened in LA. And Seattle was a liberal city at the time. It was a much smaller place than Chicago and LA. We were very much entrenched in the community. Everybody knew who we were. And he decided that he didn't want to have our bloodshed on his hands. So he told the ATF, "I am not going to give you backup to raid their office." And so it didn't happen. And to this very day, I have Mayor Wes Oman to thank for our lives. And by 1972, we changed tactics again, and we saw the importance of being involved in the political arena. Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman, congresswoman, decided to run for president. We were the first black organization that ran out to support her. When the voting finally started, we had vans, Panthers with vans and cars. We had a lot of community work. We went door to door, taking old people out. There were black people who had never voted before. We took them out of their house and put them in the vans and took them to the polling places. We had Panthers and volunteers standing on all the freeway overpasses, standing on all the corners with the big signs, Bobby Seale for Mary Lane, Brown for City Council. It was just tremendous. We had no idea that we were going to come as close as we did, but we almost won. Bobby Seale had just gotten out of prison in Connecticut, charged with attempted murder. And he almost won. He almost won. We gave up everything. We gave up everything for this struggle, for this movement. We're just by the grace of God, we're still alive today. You know? So, thank you, and
So you mentioned, I think it was Bible seals like Bill Clinton and the Second Amendment and Constitution and stuff like that. Is it you were there basically?
well, you know, I don't think that, there's a lot of different ways to do things. And that was the beauty of the Black Panther Party. We were never wedded to one way of doing something. We were constantly changing. You know, the first couple of years it was about educating people about the right to bear arms. But we changed that tactic because we knew eventually it was working against us. We had to try other tactics. But there's a lot of different ways to work against it. I don't think that we need to go out and think that we're going to shoot police. I mean, in New York, they got giant billboards. $10,000 reward for anybody who shoots at police officers. So there are other things that we can do. And we can organize the community, we can build broad-based coalitions. We can start working with the police and going down and talking with them. And talking and building a relationship with them. There's a lot of different things that we can do. Go first.
I want to address this to everyone here. How do you whites feel when you see all these things that divide us, and you see the injustice that's being inflicted upon us? You all see this. You record these things. You got YouTube, you know, the access to the internet. If hatred is in your heart, it can never be injustice. The world see the injustice. That's why they supported them. That's why they supported the Panthers, because they see the injustice that America is inflicting upon the brothers and sisters in this world, in this country. And it's not fair. And we saying yes. What are we going to do? What are you doing? What are we doing? I go to my job and I hear brothers, and I'm a construction carpenter, and I see how brothers are treated inside the union. I pay union dues. This world is never going to change, especially this country. So yes, we can fight all we want. We can put together organizations and continue to fight. It's going to all fail because it's hatred in men's hearts.
You have a different understanding of it when you hear from a brother like Aaron Dixon what it is we're up against. Because you think about the brilliance and the experience that he carries, and understand the majority of people who did what he did are in prison, are killed, or are broken. That's what we're up against. That's how relentless this system is, and we have to be relentless. And that's why I think the most important thing is that this can't just be a history lesson. We can't just leave here and say, that was really interesting, you know, I learned a lot. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Let's keep talking. Let's meet in the back. Let's meet. Our group meets, every Thursday at 7, right next door. And by the way, this is a health center. This is owned by Cotton Square Health Center. There were no health centers before the Panthers. Right. There was no free meals in schools before the Panthers. Right. So the question isn't, will things ever change? Things have changed. They changed them. And we need to change them today.